Every day, we walk through real life. The wait, the questions, the moments we don't always understand. And sometimes it feels like nothing is changing. But what if it is? Because Jesus is alive, God is already making all things new. Not someday, but right here, right now. A new life that changes how we live, how we love, how we give, and how we hope. This is Real Life Resurrection.
Hey, how's it going? Whoa, whoops, lots of whoops. It's Mother's Day, which is a big day, and it's so good to be here with you guys today. If we haven't met, my name is Matthew, and I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Prairie Heights, and it's a real gift to be with you all today. Michelle, who I just love getting to listen to her the last two services as she shares her heart, she and her husband, Troy, have been my host family the last few times that I've been here. And it's just been so cool to be brought into their family and to get to meet their kids and their grandkids. And Troy makes an incredible breakfast, and Michelle makes really great coffee, and they have an amazing dog named Molly, who I have really fallen in love with deeply. And so it's just been such a sweet thing to be a part of their family. So it is Mother's Day, and today I'm thinking about two women who are not here, but they're in Atlanta. But I've been very grateful in my life to be surrounded by really strong, incredible women my whole life. And the first, of course, was my mom. She was, and she still is, the engine that ran our family. She was unstoppable. I will never forget, Mom had surgery. I don't even remember what part of her body it was on, but I know that it was like R&R for a while. But like 1 week into recovery, we came in and she was like lifting the couch to vacuum underneath it. And that's what it was like growing up with her. It was just like, everything. You could walk off anything. You could walk off a broken leg. You just shake it off, have a snack, you'll be fine. She was the perfect mom for 3 boys, just tough as nails, but also with this really soft center that was able to kind of house and create space for all the complex and contradictory, inner life that's a part of being, a kid, like a growing boy. And also could manage all the chaos of Little League and football and soccer and basketball and school plays and band concerts and youth group events, and just lived in a minivan and drove us around the world and put thousands and thousands of miles on it, and just kept everything together and grounded and fed us every night. She was an amazing cook. We still cook the meals that Mom raised us on for our own kids, and it was family recipes, and there was always tons of extra because there were always friends over. And I'm just so grateful to have had her as a mom and as a model of what it's like. And then I married a person who was so totally different from my mom, who you will never find lifting a couch to vacuum underneath it. Like, that is the furthest thing that Rebecca could ever imagine doing. But what she is the emotional anchor of our family, and our 4 kids really they are grounded in her. She is the one that they always look to when they're hurting. I'm the one who gets called when things are broken. So every time my daughter calls me from college, I know something's wrong with the car, something's wrong with the computer. Like that's my job. But they call her when they're in pain. And she has, because of that, just made our home a space where they feel loved and known and safe and accepted, and a place where they can be themselves. And I mentioned this at a previous sermon, but really my wife's like full-time job these days is to be the chief advocate and lay medical expert and caretaker for our daughter with medically complex diagnoses. And she does it tirelessly, and she does it without complaining. She's just always there, like at the doctor, at the hospital, driving around and making space for all of our other kids and all their complex inner world stuff and adolescent boys and all that stuff. And it's just amazing, right? Moms are incredible. Like, so much of what they do, most of what they do is outside of the limelight. Most of what they do is something that exists in the shadows, and they don't nearly get enough recognition. So if you are lucky enough to have someone like that in your life, I hope today you will pamper them really well. I talked to one mom in the lobby after the first service, and her dream Mother's Day was that she was going to go home and mow the lawn. So if that's your thing, then great. That feels like the opposite of my dream day, but I'm glad that woman exists on this earth, because lawns need to get mowed. Today we're going to talk about labor. and not the kind of labor that pushes out babies, although I do think it's very instructive that women literally, their initiation into motherhood is something that we just call simply labor, as though like when it's over, the work's done. Everybody knows that actually the work of a mom doesn't ever end. It just continues to go. Even after you're an empty nester, it just goes on and on and on. But all of us in here have labor. All of us in here have work that we do, things that we give our life to, that we spend, in hindsight, the majority of our life doing. You know, that sort of Monday to Friday or whatever your work week is and whatever your hours are. And some of you, you know, you might have like, you know, work 3 shifts a week, and some of you might be like on the road all week long, and some of you, you know, might be just a stay-at-home mom and you're keeping the house going, and that's like a 24/7 thing. But whatever it is, today I want to talk about what is that thing that you and I all do that's part of our life, whether you're a student or a spinal surgeon or you walk dogs or you make coffee or you tally spreadsheets, whatever it is that you and I do, does it matter? Like, does it actually mean anything? Or is it just something that we do to reach an end, to pay a bill, to earn money, to whatever? Most of us in the West tend to automatically sort of break our life into 2 categories. There's like the stuff that matters. There's, you know, we might call it like the spiritual stuff, or the eternal stuff, the emotional stuff, the family stuff, or the relationship stuff. And then there's the rest of it. This is just this is like the unseen foundation that's necessary to support the structure so that the real stuff can happen. But this doesn't really mean anything. It's temporary. It's physical. It's secular. Whatever it is. And the reason that most of us do this is because all of us in this room, whether you know it or not, have been deeply, deeply influenced by the thinking of the Greek philosopher Plato. 400 years before the time of Christ, Plato was teaching something called dualism. And dualism is essentially this idea that all of life is broken up into 2 categories. You have the things that last, the things that are eternal, the things that are usually, they're immaterial. And then you have the material stuff, and this is temporary. It doesn't really matter. It's broken up. And so we do that with our life. We do that with our week. We think like Sundays are like a day when God's a part of it, and then Monday when I just go into the office and punch a clock or get in the truck or start to deliver things or whatever. That's a totally different, that's not a spiritual thing, that's just a secular thing. Even if you work at a church, which I know something about because I did it for a while, you do it in your church job. You know, you think like, okay, so preaching a sermon, that's a spiritual thing, but filling out the expense report, that's not spiritual, right? That's a secular thing. Or meeting with a person who's going through a hard thing, that's a spiritual thing, that matters. But just having lunch with a friend and hanging out, that doesn't matter nearly as much. Or writing a song or leading worship, that really matters. But creating the song charts and making the slides that show up on the screen, that's kind of immaterial. And we tend to do that with our life, and yet the scriptures, the Bible, paints a very, very different picture for all that stuff that you might considered to be throwaway. All the stuff that seems like, oh, it just, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's just trying to meet an end. It's just getting to a goal. And actually, the Bible, we're going to see today, gives immense dignity to that. It actually challenges this whole idea that your life exists in 2 categories and says, actually, you are unicategorical. You are more integrated than you realize. Your life is more connected and interconnected than you understand because of the resurrection. Because we're on this side of the resurrection, everything about everything, including our work, including our 9-to-5s, changes. Let's begin with this. We're going to do a quick flyover of what does the Bible say about work. So let's start with this. If you take a Bible and you open it to the very first page, the first thing you'll see is that God is a God who works and a God who rests. It's literally how the Bible starts. God is working. He works for 6 days. He creates creation. And then on the 7th day, he rests. And on the 6th day, when he makes us, he says, let's make people in our image. That is, like, let's put our divine thumbprint on their souls so that they reflect us on the earth, so that they are like us. And what does he say? He says, and we'll give them dominion, meaning they'll have authority and rule. They'll have things to do. They'll have work to do. And so right from the very beginning, we get this idea that work is from God and work is good. In fact, the first thing that God does to Adam after the creation story is it says, and the Lord took Adam and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to care for it. Now think about this. This is supposed to be paradise, right? They're in paradise at this point. There's nothing wrong with the world yet. It's just Adam and his wife, and they are naked vegans, and they are living a paradise life. And what are they doing? They're working 6 days a week. And you think, that doesn't sound like paradise to me. But it is. That is what God has made us for. He's made us for work. Work is good, and work is from God. But really quickly, in fact, you just turn one page over in your Bible and you get to chapter 3 and you see, but really quickly, sin enters the story and death enters the story and all this brokenness enters the story, and our relationship with God breaks, and our relationship with one another breaks, and our relationship with creation breaks, and our relationship with work breaks. And so work that was good and is from God becomes broken. We see this as God is sort of confronting Adam after, if you know the story, they ate the apple and they weren't supposed to and all this stuff. And all this brokenness sort of enters into the world. And so God looks at Adam and he says, "Cursed now is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you. You will eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your brow. You will eat your food until you return to the ground." This is the Bible's way of saying, this is why work is hard. This is why, for so many of us in this room, work feels like the thing that we are least excited about, the thing that we least want to do tomorrow. You already kind of got the Sunday scaries, or if you didn't, now you did, because I just said Sunday scaries. You're like, Sunday scaries. When do I have to start checking email? When do I have to start checking in? Like, it's already there. It's waiting for you. Like, the classroom's going to be full, and the kids are back, and it's almost the summer, and they're going crazy, and like, this is what my life is going to be like. And you're already starting to feel it. This is why work feels so hard, because God says it's not working the way it's supposed to. There's opposition to it. There's thorns and thistles. The ground is hard. It doesn't reap the crop that you think it should. The things that you give yourself to can feel fruitless and pointless and exhausting, and like they're sapping you of purpose and meaning in life. And yet, work is, at its core, at its foundation, good and from God. It's just broken. And this is what leads us to today's sort of key verse. This is where we're going to launch off of and spend the rest of the time on this idea. That now on this side of the resurrection, this work thing that was good and from God and was broken is now being refashioned and remade on this side of the resurrection because Jesus is doing something new. He's taking all of the constituent parts of our life, our relationships, our family life, our sex life, our money, all of it, and he's refashioning it in light of new heavens and new earth, in light of new creation, in light of what God is doing in the world. And our work is also going on the operating table. He's doing something new with it. And so this is how Paul, the Apostle Paul, sort of summarizes it at the end of 1 Corinthians 15, which is the chapter that we started this whole series with like 5-6 weeks ago. And this is, he says these words. These are the last verse of the chapter. "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." Now, you and I might expect naturally something different at that point in 1 Corinthians 15, because as you might remember, it's 57 verses of an argument Paul is making that the resurrection happened, that there are eyewitnesses and they're still alive, and that because it happened, it tells us everything about our future, because Christ is the first fruits. And if it didn't happen, then everything that we're doing right now in this space is essentially a waste of time. He literally says that if Christ is not raised, then those of us who call ourselves Christians should be pitied. Because you don't just lose a part of Christian teaching if you take out the resurrection. You lose the entire thing whole hog. There's nothing left of it that is discernibly Christian. And he says, therefore, if Christ isn't raised, you and I should eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. In other words, why would you give your life to the hard things of sacrificing for others, of putting yourself behind others so others can advance, of loving others even at your own cost, if this life is all you get? If all you get is 60, 70 years, and then 80 years, and then it's over, then go have, everyone leave. You should go have brunch right now. Why are you here? But his contention is, it did happen. It did happen. And because it happened, Everything changes. And so you would probably think, if you're sort of following the logic train, okay, so we get to the end of this chapter, and it would make sense for him to say, so therefore, relax. Life is good. God is telling a good story. Your future is set. God is wrapping all things together into something that is new. And it's certain because Jesus walked out of a tomb. So rejoice, rejoice and take it easy. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he says at the very end, therefore, get busy. Why? And not just like busy for busy's sake. He says, give yourself always fully to the work of the Lord. Give yourself always fully. It's literally the Greek construction is like this idea of like, do more than you think you have the capacity to do. Like overextend yourself. Like burn the candle at two ends. Why? Why would we do that? Well, the qualifier is super important. It's not because he's saying, hey, since Jesus is raised, go burn yourself out. That's not it at all. He says, since Christ is raised, all work matters. He says, your labor is not in vain. So the resurrection, what it does is it doesn't just motivate work, it validates work. It validates work and says, therefore, since Christ is raised, everything you and I do in the Lord lasts. One of the sort of Christian ideas that is baked into this idea comes from the idea of like vocation. Probably many of you are familiar with like vocation. It's the Latin root is vocatus, which is calling. We tend to only talk about our calling when we're talking about like something in ministry. People will say like, when were you called into the ministry? Very few people are like, when were you called into truck driving? Like that's not a thing that people tend to ask one another because that's not a calling, that's just a career, that's just a job, that's just something that you decided to do. But if you're in ministry, you were called to that. But the church, for at least the last 500 years, has said, that's entirely wrong. Every one of us is called equally. There is no higher calling than another. All of us are called to the life that we are currently in, and God's doing something through it in you and for those around you. There was a shoemaker who came to be a Christian through the ministry of Martin Luther, one of the reformers in the 16th century. And he came to Luther and he said, okay, so now I'm a Christian, what should I do? And his full expectation was, well, now that you're a Christian, it's time to start doing things that matter. So let's sell the shoe shop, come to the church, we need more hands here, you can be a priest or whatever it is. And that's not what Luther said at all. Luther said, oh, great, now that you're a Christian and a shoemaker, your job is to make good shoes and sell them at a fair price. Make a good shoe, sell it at a fair price. Like, well, what about ministries? Like, that's your ministry. That's your calling. The Reformation, one of the ideas that was at the central of it, it wasn't just saying like, the Roman Catholic Church is wrong about theology in these ways. It was also like, the Roman Catholic Church is wrong about calling in these ways. And it flipped on its head the whole vocational hierarchy that at that time dominated the Western world, which is that there were jobs that matter, priests, bishops, monks, nuns, and then there were shoemakers, there were cobblers, there were blacksmiths, there were farmers, and these things don't really matter. One of my favorite books, I think I quoted it last time, but Tish Harrison Warren has a book called Liturgy of the Ordinary. It's a little book. It's beautiful and devotional and sweet, and it'll make you cry and laugh and all sorts of stuff. She says this in the book, though. She says, the reformers taught that a farmer can worship God by being a good farmer, and that a parent changing diapers can be as near to Jesus as the Pope. And this was a scandal. So Paul says, give yourself fully to the work of the Lord. What's he talking about when he says the work of the Lord? Is he talking about dishes, diapers, and spreadsheets, and sales meetings? What is the work of the Lord? There's two errors that we tend to make when we think about what part of our work matters. The first is we would say, well, work matters because work is an avenue for evangelism. So my work, I may not do something very important, but I get to be a witness for Jesus in the office or wherever, and because of that, there's significance. I may spend 40 years as a bean counter at this firm, but I got to have a couple of really meaningful conversations along the way with Larry, and those conversations are why I was there. That's what really matters. And listen, that is part of why you're there, to have that conversation with Larry. But that's not the only thing about that work that matters. It's not the only thing that exists beyond, sort of your career. Or the other thing we say is, okay, so in order for work to matter, it has to be sort of in step with what God is doing on the earth around justice. He's righting the wrongs. He's caring for the poor. He's giving voice to the voiceless. He cares for those in the margins. And so as long as what I'm doing is in some way connected to that kind of restorative new heavens and new earth work, then that really matters. And so my job, at the bean factory, which we make beans for the person who counts beans over there, that may not really matter, but I make money, and through the money I make, I can give it to a charity that's caring for the homeless people in my city. And so that's why this matters, because that's actually, and it's like, okay, that also is true, but that's not what Paul's talking about. He's not saying that the reason your job matters is because you get to make money and give it to things that actually matter. He's saying your job matters, full stop. So what is the line? Is there a line between where the work of the Lord ends and the work of man begins? And the resurrection says, unequivocally, no, there's no line. All of it has the potential to be the work of the Lord. One of my favorite theologians is N.T. Wright. He has an incredible book about heaven and the afterlife called Surprised by Hope, and I highly recommend it. But he says this in that book. He says, you are not oiling the wheels of a machine that's about to roll off a cliff. You're not restoring a great painting that's shortly going to be thrown on the fire. You're not planting roses in a garden that's about to be dug up for a building site. You are accomplishing something that will become, in due course, part of God's new world. Every act of love, gratitude, and kindness, every work of art, music, inspired by the love of God, every minute spent teaching a severely handicapped child to read or to walk, every act of care and nurture, of comfort and support, all of this will find its way through the resurrecting power of God into the new creation that God will one day make. That's the vision. That's the vision behind Paul saying, give yourself fully to what's in front of you because it's not in vain. In other words, everything you and I do matters, and none of it is lost. None of it will fall through the cracks. This is the vision, and it changes how you and I show up tomorrow morning to work. It changes how you and I open our inbox. It changes the attitude that we have. It changes the spirit of what we're doing. Now, I do want to say one qualifier that I think is important. There are jobs in the world and industries that I don't think by any stretch you can say are part of the work of the Lord. There are things that are intentionally advancing exploitation, that are needlessly destroying creation, that are harming the innocent or the unborn. There are jobs in the world that are just out there moving in opposition to what God is doing in the world. That's just true. That is, and if you're in one of those roles, and you feel convicted about that, maybe that's a question to give some oxygen to. Maybe it's something to bring to your community. I'm not telling you what to do here, but if you think, actually, I'm kind of like, maybe that's me, then maybe that's something for you to think about with your people. Sometimes in obedience to the way of Jesus, we do actually need to remove ourselves from some spaces and some environments. Like that's part of what it means to follow Jesus. But most of us, that's not our story, right? Most of us we're just like cleaning carpets and delivering stuff and making latte art and like filling out spreadsheets and running sales meetings and taking classes and changing diapers. And that's what most of us, we're at the very least, you're saying, well, like my life, I don't see how this is moving God's plan ahead, but at least it's a neutral. I'm not in opposition to what God is doing in the world. How then are these things that feel mundane or basic or tedious, how are they a part of the work of the Lord? And I think about it in two ways. The first is this: almost all jobs, in some way, if you think about it can be a part of contributing to human betterment and flourishing. In other words, what God is doing in the world where he's pulling people out of darkness into light, all jobs, and this is like spinal surgeons to dog walkers, like everything in between, most jobs that we're doing, whether it's education or food service or, support or whatever, is a way of taking care of people and helping them get better in some way. And so in that sense, like we're in agreement with what God's doing in the world. Like we're a part of that story. But there's something else as well, because sometimes you just you're like, man, Matthew, I'm just not seeing the way that this spreadsheet that is counting things that no one cares about in the whole universe, how that's a part of God's plan. Like I don't see where God is in any of that. And I'll say, if that's you, then even still God is doing something through that work in you. There's another verse that Paul writes in a separate letter to a church in Colossae, where he says this. He says, whatever you do, do it with all your heart, as though you're working for the Lord and not for human masters. Why? Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward, it is the Lord Christ you are serving. It's an incredible verse. I love it. Whatever you do, do it with all your heart as you're doing it for God and not for human masters. Now, the context of this verse is amazing because Paul, if you read the verse before, Paul is writing to slaves. He's writing to people that have no agency over their life. Some of you are like, I feel like that's my story. I don't feel like I chose it. Like I studied something in school I was passionate about, but then I got out and I just needed a job, or like my wife got pregnant and we weren't expecting that, and now I need health insurance, and so I just take the first career opportunity, and now I'm 15 years into this thing and I don't care about this at all, but I don't know what to do now, and it's too late and I've lost my training. I can't go back to that. And Paul is saying, do you feel like you have no agency over your life? Like you are where you are by some weird quirk? Whatever you do it with all your heart as though you're working for the Lord and not for human masters. Why? What does Paul hold out? He says, because you know that you will receive from the Lord an inheritance as a reward. This is one of my favorite things about God. I grew up assuming that basically with God, he cared about very few things in my life. He cared about how many times I was going to church. He cared about how much of my Bible I read. He cared a lot about anything sexual. Like there was tons of energy around that. But pretty much everything else, nothing really mattered. Like it was just all going to get burned up. And it turns out God cares about all of it. He cares about all of it. Nothing is lost. Nothing falls through the cracks. Even the things that feel so like, how is this connected to a larger story where God is making all things new? Well, it's because he sees it, and he sees who you're choosing to be in the middle of it. God is like a proud parent who has an overstuffed refrigerator of all the things you've ever brought home. He sees and doesn't waste any of it. Nothing goes in the garbage bin with God. He somehow takes all of these things, all the constituent parts of your vocational life, and says, this matters and it lasts forever. It will echo into eternity. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Tish Harrison Warren, again in her book, says, our task, therefore, is not to somehow inject God into our work, but to join the work that God is already doing in and through our vocational lives. So the job is not to say like, okay, so how do I bring God into this? But it's to see like, God's already doing something here. Thomas, who works here, he was sharing this quote with me in between our services, but that he heard this last week. But someone says, we need to become like archaeologists who give ourselves to the work of uncovering what God is already doing all around us if we just have eyes to see. That everything matters to God. He's already doing something through your life, through your job. You just maybe don't see it yet. Especially if you're tired or burnt out or you feel like it doesn't mean anything. He sees it. And he's taking everything, every part of it, and causing it to last into eternity. Someone asked Martin Luther one time, if he knew the world was going to end tomorrow, what would he do? And I love his answer so much. He says, I'd go outside and I'd plant a tree. And you say, why? If the world's going to end tomorrow, why would you plant a tree? Because don't you understand? Nothing is lost. God's rescuing all of it. Nothing falls through the cracks. Nothing is too unimportant. Nothing is too banal. Everything matters to God. He sees it, and he invites you and I to live as though that were true. I have a friend, years ago, we used to kind of get in conversations around this because I've been very inspired by this idea for a long time, that everything matters. Everything. And I remember her saying, if everything matters, if there's no part of my life that's like throwaway, then that feels immensely crushing to me. Does that resonate with some of you? That feels like if everything matters, and that I feel like I'm choking on that idea. Because all of us know, like sometimes you just need to have throwaway time, right? Sometimes you just need doom scroll time. It's okay. God cares, he's there. But sometimes you just need throwaway time, you know? You get in the driveway, you come home and you've been gone, and you sit in the car for 10 minutes. And just look at your phone. You just need throwaway time. Yeah, you got responsibilities and kids and all sorts of stuff waiting inside, and the groceries are getting warm in the back, and you just need to sit for 10 minutes and scroll your phone. We understand that. Listen, this idea that everything matters is not a law that crushes. It's an idea, it's a motivation that's meant to liberate. So many of us, the hard workers in the world, the reason why we work so hard and so tireless is because of what we're getting out of it. Meaning we get accolades, we get titles, we get money, we get security, we get whatever it is. But what most of us in here, what we struggle with our work is the identity we get out of it. We get an identity that is all tangled up in our performance. And what the gospel does is it takes that tension and it just completely removes it. So that instead we understand like what you're being offered to do here is to participate in something that's already happening. It's going to go on without you, but it'll be better with you in it. It doesn't need you, but you're welcome to participate. You're like a kid in a family that is fully accepted, fully known, fully loved. Nothing you could possibly do would put you on the streets tonight. You have a bedroom, you have a name. It is your family, it is your place. God loves you unconditionally as you are right now. Not who you'll be, but who you are right now. And so therefore, you get to live as though that story is true. And everything you do is a response of gratitude and joy to that security. That's what this actually is meant to produce in us. The resurrection is a good end to a story that we know we're living in. And so everything now between here and there is chock full of meaning and purpose because nothing falls through the cracks for God. He cares about it all. The resurrection collapses this whole idea of the sacred and the secular. Not because everything is suddenly ministry, but because everything is an offering to God. So your life is full of things like sacred expense reports and sacred project management and sacred coffee with a friend and sacred diaper changes, not because you're constantly talking about Jesus, but simply because you're doing it as someone who knows that God is doing something in your midst and you're a part of it and he cares about it. He sees. There's this poem that I love by John Bunyan, who you may know, he wrote the book called Pilgrim's Progress. It's one of the best-selling books of all time. But this is the little poem. He says, "Run, John, run, the law commands, but gives us neither feet nor hands. Far better news the gospel brings. It bids us fly and gives us wings." The command to always give yourself to this is not crushing. It sets us free. It gives immense dignity and value to all the tedious little things that feel like they don't matter, but they do. They matter to him. And because they matter to him, they have an eternal weight that goes on long after you and I are in the ground. So, friends, make a good shoe and sell it at a fair price. Do the work that's in front of you. Plant a tree. Empty the dishwasher for the third time today. Write the code. Teach the kid, doing all of it knowing that in the Lord, your labor is not in vain. So here's how I want to challenge you this week. And the band will come out because we're going to sing a song in response. But think as you leave, and maybe you want to take a picture of this on your phone so you can think about it later. What is a part of your week that you've never really thought of as sacred? Something that may happen this week, hopefully this week. What's a part of your week that you've never really thought of as sacred that you could show up differently to this week with a different set of eyes? What's something that you know you do? it's a weekly meeting, it's a one-on-one, it's a long drive that you got to make once a week to go visit this one off-site place. What is something every single week, and you know it's in front of you, how could you show up differently there? How could you show up as though what you're doing here is not in vain? That God sees it, he cares about it, he knows it, he loves you, he's with you in it. Jesus, we thank you that you have called us to be your hands and feet. And what that means is that we get to be an extension of your grace and goodness and movement, your love to all the people around us in all of the little things we do, both big and small, the things that seem important and the things that seem really unimportant. Somehow, God, in you, they're all important. They all matter. So help us, Lord, to feel the freedom of that, the excitement, the hopefulness. Help us to have your eyes for our lives, our vocations. And help us to meet you where you are already working in those spaces. For those of us in here, Lord, who maybe have never even thought about this idea, of what it would mean like to have a God as a part of your job, like how I just pray that this week your Spirit would, for each one of us, just in a small little way, just remind us of this. Just speak like a word, like remember I'm here. And that we would have open hearts to invite you in and to do it with you. We pray all these things in your Son's name, in Jesus. We thank you for him. Amen.